Tunnel Rat by the Walrus King. Please support the story on Royal Road, link in the description. Read by Homebrew Audiobooks. Don't forget to subscribe for further releases. We hope you enjoy the show. Chapter 6. Rat on the Roofs. Milo caught a glimpse of the hand on his arm. It was the size of his whole head. Large scarred knuckles continued into fingers with thick and dirty nails. As he was spun around, he saw that the hand matched its owner. At nearly 8 feet tall, Ralph was a mountain of muscle and scar tissue. Milo barely came up past his waist. Fight or flight reflexes kicked in, equally worthless in this situation. Luckily, he had to do neither. What have I told you about heading out without checking in with me? I've got a message for you. The hand fell from Milo's arm and pulled a folded piece of paper out of a pocket. He looked around before talking in a voice barely above a whisper. Squint wants to see you. One of his kulags dropped this off. Kulags? Ralph started ponderously moving back towards the wall of the inn and sat in a huge rocking chair. That's right, you're new here. Grab a seat for a minute and I'll tell you a few things that might, just might, keep you alive for a day. Milo grabbed a 3-legged stool and sat down. Ralph continued, keeping his voice low. Kulags were a low-level gang of thieves and smugglers who operated out of the lower docks. Not a bad bunch of guys at all, hard-working. They did nearly as much normal trading as they did smuggling. Squint was just one of them. Not a bad shot with a bow, but none too sharp otherwise, if you catch my drift. Milo just nodded. Ralph continued, keeping his voice low. Squint came back after a raid one time, just himself. He was a bit strange, strutting around like he owned the place, and a couple of the boys decided to put him in his place. They say he just smiled at them and then they fell to the ground dead with slit throats, and Squint was cleaning the blood off his blade. After that, when Squint said he was in charge, none of the other kulags argued. Kulags did good after that. Squint found odd jobs that paid well. And the other gangs didn't mess with the kulags after a couple of entire gangs just disappeared. And shit got weird. Ralph stopped his story and pulled out a worn wooden pipe, packed it with tobacco and lit it. Milo looked on with interest. He'd never seen someone do this before. After a couple of puffs, Ralph continued. Some of the boys say Squint went into the dark and went deep down. He went past the last gate and to the stairs that go to the black. No one expected him to come back. Bad times for the kulags as the gangs decided to take back the territory they'd lost. Poor decision. Squint was back 3 weeks later and he wasn't alone. He had 2 huge cat things with him. If he was a terror before, he was worse now. Now he calls himself, Lord of What I Can See. He took over the Light's End and made it his base. Anyone who argues gets a bad case of dead. Funny guy though. Instead of taking over all the gangs and smuggling houses, he still just runs the kulags. Anyway, story time is over. Head on back to the end. You can't miss it. Just keep going back into the darker areas and look for a big whorehouse decked out in lanterns. Hard to miss it in the dark end. And I wouldn't keep him waiting, if you know what I mean. So, get. This last statement was punctuated by a huge foot launching Milo into the air and over the railing. He managed to grab a rung of a ladder as he sailed past, and flipped around, his feet finding support. He quickly climbed down to the ground level. The sun was starting to set. More and more lights were being lit along the main streets while the alleys and rooftops went from shadows to darkness. Milo's sight changed slowly. Things grew sharper, but colors faded. He looked around the city. It was like someone had taken 4 or 5 cities and just put them on top of each other, connecting them with walkways and ladders. Far above he could even see structures that started from the rocky roofs extending downward. He looked at the message. There was a crude map drawn on it. It showed the harbor, the building he'd woken up in, and then an arrow pointing to deeper into the cavern. A scrawled message said, "See you soon. Your buddy Squint, Kulag." This was so outside of Milo's experiences that he hesitated. Even talking to Ralph and being near people was odd. He kept telling himself it was just a game, no matter how real it felt. Still, best to not keep this person waiting. He moved to the darker side of the street and started walking further into the cavern. The streets were a mix of stone and packed gravel. A few times he crossed over bridges spanning chasms. The streetlights in front of the better-looking buildings seemed to be automatic. In other places people were hanging lanterns or refilling ones atop lampposts. The city had an uneven look to it. Older buildings were often of stone, taking up an entire city block and soaring up several stories with few windows down low. Wooden buildings surrounded them, their rotting structures leaning drunkenly against their sober stone compatriots. The road he was following came up on a large stone bridge that arched over a substantial crack in the ground. Milo could hear the sound of rushing water. The lights on the bridge showed several people on the bridge. They weren't going anywhere, simply leaning against the stone rails, watching and talking. He decided to go around. He didn't see any other bridges, but there were walkways high up. He moved into the alley under the bridge, tossed his sandals into his pack, and started to climb up the side. His fingers and toes easily found handholds as he scrambled up 6 stories to the walkway across the chasm. He paused to look around his surroundings. He liked it better up here. More dimensions in which to flee. The bridge was dark. A small lantern shed light on his end, but the center of the bridge and the other end were dark. He started across, the bridge swaying beneath him. He could see down to the dark water moving swiftly through the chasm. Where did the water go? Did it dig a path deeper into the earth? Or simply drain into the bay? He was nearly across when 2 dark shadows moved from the deeper darkness. They crept to spots on either side of the bridge end. Another shadow moved in the area between the buildings that the bridge led to. If he had worse sight, or hadn't noticed them, he would have ended up ambushed by 3 directions. The 2 nearest him were holding knives. He doubted they just wanted to talk. Milo could go back, but would other ways be guarded as well? Probably. They'd seen his coming, probably the reason why that pitiful little lantern was there. His night vision might be much better than theirs. His stamina had recovered enough that he could change to his other form. If he was getting into a fight, he wanted a tail. He felt more in control after the change. Fighting with just a rusty dagger had felt suicidal. Add a tail and claws? A better chance. His plan was to attack one of them, and if the fight went badly, just run forward or retreat. Not much of a plan, but the best he had. He skulked silently forward. The attacker on that side was blocked from seeing him by the railing on that side. When he was 20 feet away, Milo jumped onto the railing, rushed forward and then leapt for the left side attacker. Snakebite was surprised as hell when someone dropped on him suddenly. He'd heard Bearbait's sudden cursing and started to move forward to put his dagger into their mark's kidneys. That's how they did it. Bearbait would stand up and swing at them, the mark turned, and Snakebite got a free shot at their back. This run along the railing and attack without warning shit was cheating. He swung clumsily at his victim now attacker as a dagger stabbed for his own side. Claws made furrows down his cheek, and something grabbed his knife hand. You attack Snakebite. Plus 20% bonus to hit first round for surprise attack, plus 10% bonus for superior night vision. Rusty Dagger hits for 40 damage, Rusty Dagger, 30% base plus 5% XDEX, damage, 30 plus 5 XDEX equals 40, Weak Claws hit for 30 damage, Weak Claws, 30% base plus 5% XDEX, damage, 20 plus 5 XDEX equals 40, Tail attack hits. Opponent knife hand is entangled. Milo dodged the clumsy attack and his tail wrapped around his opponent's wrist. He quickly stabbed him again and the human collapsed to the ground. Shit. What the hell? Bearbait couldn't see well in the dark, but it was obvious they had ambushed something out of the ordinary. Bearbait preferred a machete. He swung clumsily at the thing in front of him, but it stepped back over Snakebite's corpse, staying out of reach. On his next miss the creature dove at him. A dagger buried itself in his forearm and he dropped his weapon, something tripped him, and then the thing was on top of him, clawing and stabbing. Roach. Damn it Roach, I need some help here. Roach. Roach was smarter than he looked, and he didn't like Bearbait. He decided he wanted no part of this fight. He took his chances and sprinted across the bridge. He'd take his chances on the docks. Behind him, Bearbait's screams ceased. Milo stood up. The second attacker wasn't moving, and the third was fleeing in the opposite direction he needed to go. He had a small cut on one arm, but was otherwise unhurt. What was he supposed to do with these guys? Were they players like him? He quickly went through their pockets. He came away with 3 copper coins, 2 rusty daggers, and a machete. Bearbait also had a silver necklace in his pocket and Snakebite had a set of lockpicks hidden in a shabby leather bracer on his forearm. Maybe from someone he'd collected toll from? Milo put the necklace and extra weapons in his pack, and slipped the bracer onto his left forearm. Maybe he could sell the extra daggers. Time to get moving. As he started to leave, he saw the bodies disappear, and 2 small headstones take their place. So they had been players. Interesting. He kept to the rooftops after the fight. It was easier than getting into more fights by traveling known routes through the dark city. After an hour, he took a break on the top of a tall roof, in an alcove by a chimney. Congratulations on surviving your first fight. You have obviously stepped upon the path of glory and fame. Or maybe you just killed 2 lowlifes who deserved it. You received a bonus for taking on 3 players of your level who had set an ambush. You have gained 50 experience in Small Blades. Small Blades has reached level 1. You gain plus 5% to hit. You have gained 50 experience in Weak Claws. Weak Claws has reached level 1. You gain plus 5% to hit. You have gained 50 experience in Dodge. Dodge has reached level 1. You gain plus 5% to evasion when using Dodge. You have gained 50 experience in Tailfighting. Tailfighting has reached level 1. You gain plus 5% to hit with your tail, or to successfully accomplish grapples. You have gained 25 experience in Skulk. You have gained 25 experience in Acrobatics. You have gained 25 experience in Sense Danger. You have gained 25 experience in Climb. You have also gained experience in the stats that govern the skills that you used. Experience towards level 1. 301,000. Milo wanted to sit and figure out what all this meant, but he had an appointment to keep. Ralph had emphasized not upsetting this guy. After a short rest, Milo hurried on. He came to the end of the rooftops. The buildings just stopped. In their place was a large open area like a plaza. Buildings ringed it. All were lit up somewhat, but the biggest at the far end of the plaza was ablaze with hundreds of lights. Beyond that, the large cavern was unlit. Climbing down to ground level, he changed back to his human form. He was thinking he really preferred the other one. He missed his tail and claws already. Chapter 7. Light's End. Milo skulked in the shadows until he was forced to step into the lit street and make his way up to the square. There were people entering and leaving, but no one paid a bit of attention to him. While he had the unmistakable look of a new player with his rags and lack of armor, this wasn't uncommon in Light's End. Any player who started in or visited Shadowport made their way down here sooner or later. He made a slow circuit around the open area's perimeter, taking in the various buildings that ringed it. 1 or 2 might have been private homes. They were sturdily built of stone and had visible guards at the doors. Most of the rest were bars or brothels. There were a couple of notable exceptions. A massive wooden building that included a livery stable had a sign that labeled it as Deep Mountain Excursions and a saying. There was a line of people outside holding sacks or boxes, and in one case a larger person in plate mail was pushing a wheelbarrow full of rocks. The second strange building was extremely tall, reaching nearly to the roof. It looked like 5 buildings had been mashed together with different styles showing each time it had been expanded. The sign over the top simply said, Guild Hall. A smaller sign said, Behave or be dead. Milo noted it had no line to get inside. The center of the area was a mess of small vendors, carts, and awnings. Milo had seen something similar in the habitat. There was an open area in D section, where floors 31 to 33 were just one big open area. Plans identified it as a sports center which had never been built. Instead, it was a market for all the junk anyone thought might be valuable. Ancient video games, clothing, tools, bottled water, freeze-dried foods. Some things had been traded or swapped hundreds of times there. Milo had gone there only twice, when looking for some specific chips only found in older computers. He'd hated it. Too many people, and he could only run if something went wrong. He edged around the outside of the market and headed to the Light's End. There was one door leading inside, which was open. 2 men in leather armor stood outside. When they saw Milo approach, one nudged the other, said something, and they both laughed. You look a bit young, kid, and a bit broke. Come back in a few years. I need to see Squint. They stopped laughing. No, you don't, kid. I don't know who put you up to this stunt, but leave before you say anything else stupid. Milo wasn't sure what else to do, other than hand over the note. Well, shit. One of the guards looked at the note and passed it to the other. It's your funeral, kid. Follow me. I'll give you a word of advice. Just agree with what he says, and if he yells, Kulog, you yell too. He was taken into a room in the back of the first floor. Several people were there, standing around the edges of the room. One person sat on a large red pillow in the center of the floor, eating a huge bowl of noodles. Lying on either side of him were huge cat-like creatures. They had purple fur so dark it was almost black. Muscles rippled under their skin as they rose, growling. Squint was a skinny man, with short brown hair and eyes just a little too bright. He slurped down the last of the noodles and grinned at Milo. Whoa boys, enough with the growling. This is Milo, my buddy. He's the new scout in town. We're buddies, right Milo? I got a message you had put the Eye of Wonder back in the statue of the Seventh Fate. Good job on that. No one wants the world ending early. Milo felt like he was missing something, but took the guard's advice. Thanks. And yeah, of course we're buddies. Squint smiled and looked at the cats. See guys. Told you so. He raised his fist in the air. Kulog. Everyone else did the same, including Milo. Here's the deal, Milo. I may have some work for you soon. Work for everyone. Big things happening, just not sure when. We have to be ready. I can use a good scout. That sound good to you? Milo just nodded and said, sure. Squint searched around in a pile of junk next to his pillow. Here, take this. Gives you passage across the bridge. I'll send a note when I need you. Maybe grow a bit bigger if you can. Stuff is mean here in Shadowport. Good talking to you, Milo. He tossed Milo a gambling chip that had a large K carved into it. Milo pocketed it. Squint started eating a second bowl of noodles. The guard motioned for Milo to follow him. They went back out the front door. You got lucky, kid. Sometimes he gives the new guys missions down in the caves. We never see them again. Yeah, lucky, so what am I supposed to do now? The guards laughed. Am I your mother, kid? How would I know? But here's some advice. Head over to the guild, see what jobs they have. Earn some coin and get some better gear. Because if Squint does have a job for you, you better take it. And he never hands out easy ones. Milo turned away and wandered to the guild building. Might as well get started and see what jobs they had. He was still confused about what was going on. What the hell was the Eye of Wonder, and what did it have to do with him? Chapter 8. The Basement. Milo entered the guild hall and stared around. The building was open all the way to the roof, with a dizzying series of stairs and open walkways at each level leading to rooms around the perimeter. The stairs down just disappeared into a hole in the floor. People in all sorts of garb and armor sat around drinking, arguing, and gambling. It was a little disorienting. He realized someone was talking to him. Yo, new guy, ears open and get over here. He turned and saw a halfling with huge hairy feet standing on a stool and yelling at him. You got a problem? I think you have a problem. I see you standing in my guild hall and you ain't a member. I don't like you already. Impressive. It usually takes me a whole minute to get sick of you people. Get your ass over here and get your paperwork filled out. Milo went over to the shouty little man at the desk and tried to smile. Hi, I'm Milo. Squint said to come over. The halfling put both hands on his cheeks in surprise. Oh, Squint sent you. Gee willy gosh, that makes you special. Shit, what am I doing? You look like the kind of idiot that will take me seriously. Sorry kid, you ain't special. Just another new fish that owes me his dues. Pay up and then you can go check out the job board. For someone of your esteemed level, it's the worldly sum of 1 copper penny. You got a penny left, kid, or did you spend it on the entertainment along the way? Milo pulled a penny out of his pouch and handed it to the halfling. He signed the paper the halfling pushed over to him, and accepted a badge made out of tin with his number on it. Get a piece of string, and tie that around your neck. That's your guild number. Most of you guys can't remember otherwise. Don't worry if you lose it, it shows up on your tombstones. Helps you find where you died in big battles. There you go, kid. You are now a probationary member of the Shadowport Explorers Guild. Don't let it go to your head. Milo looked at the badge, and put it into his pouch. Now what? The halfling sat down on his stool and leaned back against the wall. Holy crap. You really are new, aren't you? How many days in the game, kid? Well, not counting the tutorial, this is my first. The halfling raised an eyebrow and whistled. First day and you made it alive to Light's End and Squint got his hooks into you? Not bad, kid. Real social climber. By the way, I hate social climbers. He was silent a moment. But you did pay your penny with no argument, so I'll clue you in a bit. What we have here is a madhouse of player guilds, trade guilds, expeditions, and merchants. You can tell who's who by the brass plaques on the doors. Feel free to wander around up top. Down low too, but people have less patience. There are job boards over there. Take the ticket, head to the person offering the job, make a deal and get to work. Okay, I see more clueless people walking in. Off with you, kid, and good luck. Don't let the big folk stomp you, if you know what I mean. Milo turned to leave, walking past 3 new players, excited to finally make it to the guild hall. He heard the halfling yelling. Yo, you 3 idiots honking like a gaggle of geese. Get you butts over here. Milo walked to the job board and started looking through them cards pinned to the board. Crew needed for expedition. Must be at least level 3, know how to swim, and willing to be away from home for a few months. Immunity to charm spells and sign language skills helpful. See Captain Lars. Slaughtering crew needed to cull the land squid population. Cooking or sushi preparation gets you a bonus. See Otis in the Cooks Guild. Many of the jobs had level recommendations or requirements for gear and skills he didn't have. He found one down low on the board that seemed to have been there a while. The paper was stained and curled. Looking for brave young adventurers to venture into the caverns to procure rare mushrooms. Payment based on performance. Set your own hours. Report to Harold Earthtongue in the basement for details. Gathering and foraging skills needed. The basement stairs led down to a lower level. There were several doors, but none of them for Harold Earthtongue. Another set of stairs went down a second level. But again, he didn't find the person offering the job. An old dwarf who was darning socks pointed to a way to levels further down. Instead of stairs, it was just a ladder that went down into the darkness. Milo was thankful for his night vision. He descended down the shaft, hearing noises coming from below. After nearly 300 feet of ladder, his arms and legs aching, he dropped into a small room that was adjacent to a large mineshaft. Several horizontal shafts all terminated in a large room several acres in size. Stone pillars held up the roof some 20 feet above the heads of the people working here. 3 dwarves were drinking ale, using a crate for a table. One of them looked up. "You're too scrawny for the mines. Get lost. Don't need weaklings." Milo ignored the comment. "I'm looking for Harold Earthtongue about a job. It's in the basement here somewhere." All 3 dwarves laughed. "Oh, shit. This is rich. Harry found another sucker. This isn't the basement, kid. This is the top of the mine. Take that tunnel to the left if you want to go hunt fungus." He was at least helpful in pointing out the tunnel. This wasn't a mine tunnel, more like a series of cave tubes that slanted down, with ladders here and there to help with the descent. It took another 2 hours to get to the bottom. It would take more to get back up. This large cavern was filled with large wooden boxes from which foul odors came. Milo looked over the rim of one and saw it was filled with greenish-looking mushrooms the size of dinner plates. Some of them quivered a bit. Stay away from those. They're nearly ready to harvest and the spores can do terrible things to your lungs. Milo moved 3 steps back and turned to see who was yelling. A squat, fat human was shambling towards him. Unwashed masses of hair were sprouting from the top of his head and his chin. Not much beyond a bulbous red nose was visible, his eyes covered by goggles. Layer upon layer of dirty clothing covered his body. Milo had thought the mushroom farms smelled bad. This person was far worse. I may have the wrong place. Please let it be the wrong place. I was coming about a job." Milo held up the card. "Oh, Frabjous Day. An apprentice. It's been so long since I lost the last one. Come right this way, lad. Shrooms in the dark. Dr. Harold Earthtongue has offered you a quest. Harvest 20 pounds of wild blackbristle cap mushrooms. Reward. Better favor with Harry Earthtongue. Honest wages for an honest day's work. A boring lecture on mycology. Accept his generous offer?" Why? And Milo accepted the offer. Chapter 9. Shroom Gathering. What the miners further up referred to as the basement was a huge section of natural caverns and tunnels where Harry, as he insisted Milo refer to him, had set up a laboratory and a large mushroom farming operation. It was damp, dark, and smelled like shit. Perfect for mushrooms, but Milo understood why Harry had trouble finding people to do his little jobs. And he had his doubts that Harry ever went up to the city. The trip would be difficult for someone of his girth. He wheezed as he walked on flat ground. Somehow, he survived down here. Milo was sure he didn't want to know the details. This job was at least fairly straightforward. Go to this area in the nearby tunnels, find patches of black bristlecaps, and fill up a sack. He at least knew what they looked like now. Harry had insisted on a quick tour of the area that consisted of a large number of mushroom-filled side tunnels, the main cavern with 100 different tiny mushroom farms, and then his laboratory. The lab was a chaotic area of tables filled with beakers, retorts, mortars and pestles, strange-looking apparatus, and books. So many books. Most were huge things nearly half a foot thick with faded writing on the front or spine and yellowed and curling pages. Damp and books go together poorly. One such tome had been brought down, and shown to be an encyclopedia of different mushroom types, complete with colored pictures. This made it easy for Harry to show him what he needed to find. About 4 inches high when mature, and the top will be colored black and have prickles like the husk of a chestnut. If they scream when you cut the stalks, you have the wrong ones and should probably run. Milo was given a crude map, a gathering bag, small trowel, and a bottle of milky white liquid. If you think you may have been poisoned, this will take the edge off. It's a wonderful little concoction I make myself. He was also offered a small lantern, which he left in his pack. Much of the lichen on the walls gave off enough light that he could easily see his way. Light would just make sure anything else down here saw him coming. He immediately saw why Harry needed an assistant down here. The tunnels got much smaller as soon as they left Harry's area, with many twists and turns. Milo paused after he entered them and shifted to his more comfortable werewolf form. Claws and a tail made for easier climbing. The tunnel he was in should come out into a larger area soon. He was disappointed to see it had been nearly blocked by a cave-in. There was still a small crawlspace he could slither through. The blockage was only about 10 feet deep. As he got to the other side, he saw he wasn't the only one there. A withered body leaned against the blockage, one leg pinned under a fallen boulder. Harry had mentioned that several of his new apprentices had run off on him. This one had met a worse fate. The body was not much more than scraps of leather clothing and bones. Well-gnawed bones. A glint of something shiny showed him a metal guild tag hidden in the ribcage, fallen from a cord around the neck that had decayed. Milo grabbed it to take it back to the guild. Milo carefully searched around. A rotted leather pouch proved to have 6 copper pieces in it, and he found a small rock hammer that was in decent shape. The head was a bit rusty, but still solid. Natsu the pitted dagger the corpse held in one hand. The blade snapped as he picked it up. The body was a good reminder to be cautious. One rolling stone could trap you forever. Moving cautiously along the small tunnel, Milo finally came to the larger cavern. It was a natural domed area some 100 feet across. It was filled with mushrooms. There were several types in a confusing mixture. Tall pointy mushrooms with red spots loomed over clusters of brownish shrooms that grew in clumps. Large ones with glowing green caps over a foot across grew singly in many areas. He saw patches of the black spiky ones Harry wanted and got to work. Harry hadn't cared if he dug them up or cut them low to the ground. Either method left parts that would regrow. Milo decided to dig them up. They came up easily and he got into rhythm of uprooting them and tossing them into his bag. He was almost done when he met more resistance than expected as he uprooted a sort of black shroom, and noticed its not so spiky cap. The mushroom came out of the ground, and proved to have arms and legs, one of which had been crushed somewhat by the trowel. Small eyes opened, and a small mouth started screaming. Startled, he dropped it on the ground and stomped on it. The screaming stopped. Wow! What a start to a magnificent monster hunting career. Could you have picked on anything smaller, you big bully? You have slain immature myconid stemling. You have earned 1 experience. A large glowing, green-capped mushroom was vibrating and shaking, and then a larger mushroom man heaved itself out off the ground. The body was a long stem that split into stumpy legs and arms with large, hard-looking fists. Its angry face sported a long root-like beard. The green cap made it look like it was wearing a huge hat. Milo remembered the next part of Harry's advice: run. He grabbed his bag and headed back towards the tunnel with its unlucky occupant. The angry mushroom man gave chase. Milo got to the tunnel, and realized a flaw in his plan to flee. The narrow tunnel would be slow going, leaving his legs exposed to green-capped adversary. How tough was this guy? Milo decided to fight. He drew one of his daggers and threw at the mushroom man. The knife hit the top part of the cap and went straight in, not causing much damage. Dodging a fist, he rolled to the side and grabbed the machete. This would be better. He brought the blade down on one of its shoulders, and to his surprise, the blade cut straight through, lopping off an arm. The other arm hit him in the stomach, doubling him over. Milo decided to just keep going down and went into a painful shoulder roll. Coming up, he took the machete in both hands and swung hard horizontally. The blade hit where a neck should be, and he lopped off the entire top of the myconid. The fight was over. At least you picked on something closer to your own size. Congratulations on a victorious battle. You have slain a mature guard myconid. You have earned 10 experience each in small blades, dodge, dex, and AGI. Those weren't really so bad. Milo had only taken 10 points of damage from the punch and the creature was actually pretty easy to dodge. He decided to clear the tunnel a little, and then go back and try again. As he was clearing rocks, he noticed something shiny on one of them. Taking a better look, it seemed to be a small bit of ore. He used the rock hammer to beat the rock around the ore until a walnut-sized chunk of shiny stuff came loose. He tossed it in his pack to see what it was later. After a careful half-hour, he had a much larger escape tunnel dug. This time he paid a lot more attention to the mushrooms he was digging and the placement of the larger ones that he knew now to be guards. When the bag was full, He ran back and put it in his pack on the other side of the cave-in, and went back to the mushroom field with his machete. Instead of picking one of the immature myconids, he tossed a rock at a mature one's cap. It came out of the ground like the first, angry and charging. Milo danced around the slower-moving creature, easily dodging its blows. With 3 slashes he disarmed and killed it, getting another experience announcement. He could do this all day. And after they were all cleared, he could easily harvest all the mushrooms Harry needed without distractions. An hour later he had killed over a dozen of the myconids and only saw one left on this side of the cavern. He sauntered over to it and tossed a rock at it. Nothing happened. Looking closer, he noticed this myconid had a bit larger cap that was a darker green. He tossed a second rock, and it put a dent in the cap, exposing the pale flesh underneath. But that had done it. The cap started vibrating and something heaved itself out of the dirt. And heaved, and heaved, and heaved. The creature that came out of the ground was shaped like the others, but was gigantic, nearly 10 feet tall with a body that looked brown and gnarled. A long green beard stretched from its face to its stumpy feet. A massive dark green cap over 8 feet across covered its head. Smaller mushrooms grew from the large cap. Milo had been tossing rocks at one of those. The creature roared at him. You have angered Kronk, guardian of the cave. He vows revenge upon the meat thing that disrupted his spore mates. You will make amends by fertilizing their regrowth. Maybe Harry hadn't been warning him about the little ones. Milo ran, and Kronk was right behind him, taking 10-foot strides. Before Milo even got to the smaller cave, Kronk brought one of his huge feet up and stomped heavily on the ground. Rocks fell in the small cave, blocking his retreat. Milo had a sneaking suspicion how the other rockslide had happened. Chapter 10. Cheating with Physics. Kronk started to take a step towards Milo. Milo was calculating his chances. Assuming Kronk had the same density as normal mushrooms, the cap on his head was at least 600 pounds. Kronk had to weigh more than a ton, and with how tough he looked, maybe 2. A punch or kick from him would probably kill Milo outright, or break enough bones he'd wish he was dead. His danger sense was screaming at him, telling him to run fast. Too bad his carefully planned escape route was closed off. Stupid of him to only have one way to flee. Time seemed to slow, Kronk barely moving. Through the use of your skill, danger sense, and logical thinking, you have assessed a foe and your chances of winning a battle against him. You have an open tertiary slot. Would you like to gain the skill Identify? This will give you basic information on foes near your level, and the threat level of foes above you. Also useful in determining the nature of objects and crafting materials. Why? N? Yes. Useful skill. How bad was he outclassed? Kronk, guardian of the cave. Elite level 4 boss, a large Myconian guardian. 8 feet tall, 1 ton plus weight. Seismic stomp attack. You have less than a 0.01% chance of defeating this foe in a straight-up fight. Option 1. Stay in small area to be dug out or buried alive. Option 2. Trade punches like a real man, and die on first punch. Option 3. Play dodge tank, never get hit, whittle him down bit by bit. Option 4. Yell, better part of valor, and run. Option 4 was the least likely to get him killed. Milo didn't think too hard about the first 3. He ran straight at Kronk, and dived between his legs. Kronk's fist missed him by a foot, but he felt the impact as he rolled forward and sprinted for the other end of the cavern. At some point he must have stepped on a couple of stemlings. Their piercing screams filled the cavern, and several of the smaller guardians popped up. He got to what he thought was the end of the cavern, and saw it was open on the left-hand side. Down a small incline was a much larger cavern dominated by a gigantic mushroom that grew to the roof. Large vines grew up and around its stalk, opening into yellow flowers. Kronk was in pursuit, his thunderous steps shaking the ground. Milo decided to stay far away from the big mushroom and hug the right-hand wall. More stemlings were crushed, and more guardians made chase. Milo had a dozen of them behind him now like a parade. Kronk was at the rear, but the slope down to the bigger cavern gave him some extra speed. Milo saw an outcropping on the wall. A ledge 3 feet high jutted out from the wall. Worked stone and timbers showed an opening like a mineshaft. A quick look showed a tunnel running away into the darkness. Milo took a chance and ran in. The smaller guardians couldn't navigate the ledge. Their stubby legs didn't jump well. Kronk barely slowed. He plowed into the doorway, knocking out a support and shrugging off a couple of small rocks that hit his shoulder. And then the chase was on down the long straight corridor. Milo passed side tunnels but they were boarded up. He couldn't afford to stop and pry the boards loose with Kronk right behind him. He kept running. After nearly 200 feet, the tunnel ended in a vertical shaft. It was the only way to go. Milo leapt and grabbed a crossbeam, pulled himself up, and kept climbing. If this led to a cross tunnel, he was safe. No way Kronk could climb this. Kronk tried anyway. He was a very determined guardian. After tearing down several chunks of wood and some stone, he stopped trying and stomped the ground. Dirt and stone rattled down and Milo was nearly dislodged off the wall. The idiot mushroom was going to bring the cavern down on both of them. Milo kept climbing, looking for an escape route. He was 5 stories up when he ran out of shaft. The vertical shaft ended at the stubs of a horizontal shaft. On one side was a 20-foot by 20-foot room with a large rusting machine, mostly disassembled bits scattered all over. On the other side was a 40-foot-long tunnel ending in a very solid-looking cave-in. This passage had tracks going down the center, and a minecart loaded with rocks. Milo immediately got the idea of pushing the loaded cart down onto Kronk. This wasn't going to happen. The wheels were rusty, and the cart heavy. It would take more than a small Walrus with 0 STR to shift it. Well, if not the cart, what about one rock at a time? He hefted a large rock, probably about 20 pounds, and dropped it. It hit Kronk on the head, making a dent and bouncing off. The enraged Myconian stomped hard, dislodging dust and loose rock, and nearly tumbled Milo into the shaft. Milo doubted he could kill the monster shroom even with 100 rocks, and the mine wasn't going to take a lot more before it collapsed and killed him. He started cataloging the machinery on the other side. It soon became apparent that it was some type of mechanical hoist used for lifting entire minecarts up the shaft. The cart on the other side had heavy brace across its midpoint where a hook on the end of a cable could be secured. Sure enough, in the back other area, underneath an ancient, rotting tarp with hundreds of feet of cable. Each cable was made of many strands of a fine wire. Milo had no idea what the metal was. The 1-inch cables were as easy to bend as normal rope, but had to be much stronger. There were also a number of pulleys, and double pulleys that looked like they had been put together to raise things up while the mechanical engine was being repaired. Try as he could, he couldn't figure out what powered it, and he had no idea on how to repair it. Some of the linkages looked like real-world mechanics, but a lot of things looked more like some sort of magical engineering system. He wanted to know more. But first he had to deal with an overgrown fungus. He went back to the first plan of dropping a cart of rocks on it. Over the next few hours, he repaired and set up the pulley system so that he would be able to drag the cart back to the edge of the shaft. Then he'd need to hook it up to the overhead system, lift it up off the tracks, and drag it into position. Kronk seemed to have settled down to a half-hearted stomp every hour or so. One of the problems he ran into was the length of the cables. He didn't need several hundred feet, but he had no way to cut them. Best he could do was coil up all the unused length into a large pile. When he finally had the system set up, he got to work. Instead of trying to move the cart 40 feet with 1 Milo power, he would use the pulleys to do the equivalent work of moving 320 feet of rope with 8 Milo power. Each heave-ho on the cable moved the cart barely an inch, but the important thing was that it moved. The cart was about 2 feet from the edge when Kronk once again got bored and stomped on the ground. Milo exertions and Kronk's stomps had slowly loosened a certain rock near the edge. Milo was pushing against the rock for leverage when Kronk sent a small shockwave up. The combination was enough to send the rock down into the shaft, and Milo onto his belly. The 50-pound rock hit Kronk on his cap and sunk in deep, doing some damage. Enraged, the monster stomped again, looking up at the violator of the cave. He added another couple of stomps for emphasis. Several things happened, starting with the whole shaft groaning ominously. Next, the large coil of cable started to slide towards the edge. Milo had just staggered up and tried to stop the cable by stepping on it. This just ensured that his foot was in a loop of cable as it went over the side, jerking him off his feet and dragging Milo along with it. Milo found himself hanging by 1 foot about halfway down the shaft. The angry mushroom man looked up at Milo and their eyes met. Kronk smiled as he went to grab the cable. Milo just managed to get his foot out of the loop before the line went taut and Kronk heaved. Milo held on for dear life as Kronk jerked and pulled on the rope trying to dislodge him. Milo didn't like this at all, and when he got the chance, he leapt to the side of the shaft when a large boulder offered a decent handhold. Looking down at Kronk, he saw the Myconid guardian was no longer pulling on the cable. It had gone slack. Kronk had managed to pull the ore cart to the edge and then pull it in. The cable fell and pooled in loops around Kronk's legs as a couple tons of steel cart and rock sped towards it. Milo hugged the side of the shaft and felt the ore car just miss him. He wasn't in the clear though. The rock he was on shifted a foot, nearly coming loose from the wall, and pitched him into the shaft. From below, he heard a huge bellow of pain and the strange sound of something heavy hitting something much softer, somewhere between a splat and a sploosh. A large mass of smushed shroom parts spattered against him in midair, and a second later he landed feet first on something soft and spongy that didn't quite break his fall. The air was full of mushroom spores and he was splattered in the gooey remains of the cave guardian. He staggered a bit away from the impact site and started cleaning himself off. Congratulations. You have single-handedly slain Kronk, Guardian of the Cave, by cheating with physics. For slaying Kronk, Guardian of the Cave, a level 4 elite boss. The normal reward of 10 core skill points is increased to 15 since you accomplished this without the help of a group. You have earned 500 boss experience. Boss experience may be divided as you wish between the skills used to kill the creature. An equal number of experience will be applied to the stat associated with the skills chosen. Skills used: Mechanic, Fleet of Foot, Acrobatics, Climbing. The following core skill lists are available to you: Generic, Scout, Racial. The Myconid Collective has taken notice of your actions. Your status has been updated from annoying to minor threat. Just to be on the safe side, Milo downed half the tonic Harry had given him. He was a bit light-headed after that fight and had inhaled a lot of spores. He searched the area where Kronk and the ore car had met up. Rocks and ore were scattered everywhere, but some of it was still in the cart. 3 large fist-sized chunks caught his eye. One was steel-colored and looked to be solid metal, the other 2 a ruddy red gold. There was also a mining pick that had been covered by the ore. The pick would come in handy. The ore he tossed into his backpack. He kicked through Kronk's remains in the off chance the big shroom had some type of treasure, but all he found was a strange ball of vegetable matter, heavy and shiny. It identified as earthen heart shroom. That also went into his pack. He was too tired to continue. Time to log out and see what was going on in Section E and maybe look at the forum some. Getting back to Harry could wait for a bit.